We're going to take on one of the biggest issues, Dave, facing the American nation at this time, which is healthcare, Dave. It's healthcare and Obamacare.
Yes. Trump tackled this issue for a day and a half this week.
He did.
Done. Solved.
Huge amount of his time. We're joined on the air now by healthcare and risk management expert Andrew Clark. Andrew, how are you this fine evening?
I'm doing just fine. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, really good, really good. Now this whole thing about the Obamacare, it rises, it falls, it rises, it falls, but it feels it's always there. Even when we're talking about Kavanaugh.
Thank you, John McCain.
We're talking about North Korea. Whatever we're talking about, Andrew, it feels like Obamacare is just hovering right out of our visual range. What can you tell our audience about where this debate, before you pick a side, just where does this debate stand today? What should people be thinking about when it comes to the future of healthcare in America?
Well, where it comes to right now is that despite being in the news, despite being the buzzword, nothing is happening on a practical level. We're moving at the speed of government here.
Ooh.
The ACA is going to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, but there's nothing even scheduled on oral documents right now. There's no oral argument scheduled, so it's going to be 6 months before we even see the next legislative step happen.
Right.
Now, this case is about whether or not the tax law last year, or in December 2017, rendered Obamacare unconstitutional. Is that right? Because it took the penalty away for not having insurance.
Correct. Whether or not the tax penalty being reduced to zero is the same as the tax penalty going away or not.
Right. Because the whole constitutionality of Obamacare, according to the Supreme Court, rested on
it being
that
a tax.
Penalty being a tax.
Right.
And the Congress has the right to
You can tax
taxes.
anything. This is important. The U.S. Congress can tax anything. They can tax your gray hairs. They can tax the number of windows in your house. They can tax anything. The power of the Congress to tax, no matter how potentially arbitrary or whatever the motivation is, it's a great, great power. But when you take the tax away,
And that's when you get into severability, is whether by removing the individual mandate, the whole thing falls down. And that's what's going to get argued here in the courts.
Well, isn't the argument that they didn't remove the mandate? They just removed the
Correct.
penalty. Right. The mandate's still there. There's just no penalty.
Exactly. It's just you are being taxed. That tax is just zero.
right.
And technically, in just a few years here, who knows how this election's going to go, another budgetary reconciliation could bring that tax right back up to where it was.
Right.
Therefore, by definition, it's not gone. And
it's just
we'll have to
zero
see what the
rated.
thinks on that.
It's just
For
at a
now.
nil
Exactly.
rate for now. It's just a nil rate for now.
Exactly.
Well, isn't the play
level, it's gone. Yeah.
isn't the Trump play that he just wants this entire edifice built out of kind of popsicle sticks and twine? He wants the whole edifice just to collapse under its own weight, since he couldn't repeal it outright.
Ideal.
Yeah,
that would be ideal for them, but courts traditionally argue severability based on intent. And the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act went after the individual mandate, but left all of the other functions of the ACA in place. Medicaid expansion, pre-existing conditions, healthcare tier 26. They didn't touch that. They only went after the individual mandate. So it is an easy argument to say, no, they wanted the individual mandate to be severable because they didn't go after those other functions.
So since the Trump administration, and I guess a lot of Republicans want the ACA to fail, to collapse under its own weight, what is the brilliant next generation whiz-bang replacement plan that they have ready to go?
the Jetsons flying car version of Trump Care. What is that going to look like?
Well, unfortunately, there's not quite one ready to roll out just yet.
Okay.
And that's where things are a little sticky politically this week, because if you're going to be the party of healthcare, where's that plan at? I want to see it.
It would be a good idea.
Yeah, and which is why the president came out and went, actually, we're going to wait until after the 2020 elections. We don't want to distract from anything. but
Yeah.
trying to save face there.
If you're going to roll out some really brilliant, new, transgressive, disruptive ideas, I do it after the next election. There's no sense getting lost on that. Now I've got to ask you, because this came up on our radio show a few years ago, and I'll just ask you the question kind of very, very bluntly, Andrew. Do people want the Obamacare? do they want it? Do people want it?
Well, right now it's actually at an all-time high popularity. Only about 30% of Americans don't want it. Right. That's because pre-existing conditions, I mean, who here doesn't have a knee that is already a little bad?
Right.
Or your back hurts sometimes. We all have those pre-existing conditions. Especially older Americans. Seniors have pre-existing conditions, and who goes to the polls? Older Americans, statistically. You don't want to touch that condition. So right now, it is popular.
It's curious to me because they have these polls and they rate its popularity and they talk about what percentage of Americans, love Obamacare or hate Obamacare. How many people are on Obamacare? Isn't it 10, 12 million? Isn't it like less than 0.5% of the country?
It is not a large number, and enrollment did drop this year, but there was still new enrollment.
So when you're taking these polls,
there are more.
It's not people who have Obamacare. It's like they like the idea of it
that's
out there for,
as
for
like
those
a
people
net.
who need it.
Oh, like as a safety net? Yes. That is a popular idea. We want to help. We're Americans. We want to help the people we can. It's just an issue of getting it to them and being able to afford it.
Well, Andrew, you
hey,
say...
Ryan, what's with the pictures? It's a parking lot. Come on, will you?
Sorry about that. Our engineer's going a bit crazy in that. No, I was just saying, Andrew, I mean, there is a bit about Americans that are not like that, though. They're not really concerned about the social safety net. They're not really concerned about community health. They're not really concerned. They're concerned about themselves. And I think you look at countries that have really robust, broad medical systems like Canada or Britain. It's a different philosophy than we have here in America. How much of this do you think is really a philosophical argument about how much responsibility each of us should take in the weakest and the sickest and the least protective among us?
Honestly, I can't argue the philosophical aspects of this. I can tell you that California, where you are at,
right.
California has a larger economy than the United Kingdom put together.
Absolutely.
And that's just one state we have here. We've got 50 of them.
Right.
It's a much larger practical problem to regulate something as large as the ACA and to make it cost effective.
Don't we have California universal health care on the way? Did
California covered?
Promise us?
Is that in that Green New Deal as well? I think everything in the...
I think it's a California thing. Isn't it a Gavin Newsom thing?
Yeah, he was talking about that.
Just going to do it right here ourselves.
And
why
everyone's
wait for those slouches in
welcome.
Washington?
Everyone's welcome. You can come in. You can get on the Greyhound bus and step out and have a new hip replacement or a second kidney put in, whatever you
medical
want.
tourism. Fantastic.
We need tourism. California's a touristic state.
Aren't there a lot of, for all the safety net aspects of Obamacare, aren't a lot of people left out of it somehow?
Yes and no. If you have... Most Americans get their health care through their employers. Right now, unemployment is at record lows. We're down about in the 3 and 4% range. It's hovering. So the vast majority of Americans have access to health care. They don't need to get it through the ACA.
And it's really meant to be there if you're somehow out of employment, if you don't qualify for the existing plans like Medicare and Medi-Cal. It's supposed to be in there as anyone can just put their hand up, go to an exchange, and get their Obamacare to make sure that there's no one who either temporarily or over time is avoided. Do you feel that the overall approach of Obamacare, Andrew, do you think it's just the approach? Do you think that's the right approach? Should we have been more aggressive or less aggressive when Obamacare was rolling out all those years ago?
Well, the idea is great. The idea, of course, is wonderful. Can we help other people have health care and make them healthy, keep them alive? Of course, wonderful idea. But like any government legislation, it got convoluted, it got pork thrown into it, it got slowed down, and it didn't focus on driving the cost of healthcare down. It only focused on the financial aspect. It went with insurance. And you can't go after one leg of a beast that large. Healthcare is a sixth of the U.S. economy. $1 in $6 goes to healthcare. You can't fix that by going after one portion of it.
Well, yeah, if you are gonna limit yourself to going after one portion of it, shouldn't you go after the portion that you say you're going after? It's called the Affordable Care Act, and it doesn't do one thing to make any care affordable, right? It's just about insurance. Everything's as expensive as it ever was. The drugs, the treatments, the hospital bills, right?
Point of fact, those costs have gone up significantly. The Affordable Care Act has been very good for insurers.
Right. One question I have is when this gets up to the Supremes, when the justices of the Supreme Court of the United States of America opine on this, how do you think that's going to play out?
Well, that really comes down to, are they going to focus on the specifics of this case? The specifics of this case being the individual mandate. Is the individual mandate severable, and is the individual mandate gone? From if you were to grab an English major right now, he would tell you, no, the individual mandate is not gone. The tax has just been modified to zero, but it's still there.
I am an English major
from UCLA.
And I concur. Yes, the individual mandate still exists. There is still a penalty,
and that penalty is zero.
You are required to pay a number of dollars. That number is zero.
Now, I want to ask you, Andrew, as we're coming to the end of the segment, if any of our listeners, any of our friends and neighbors, you out there want to contact Andrew Clark. Andrew, what's the best way for them to follow you, your blogs, your information out there on the internet?
Well, they can find more about us at gdpadvisors.com, or they can find me on Somewhere in the Middle podcast. I work with a colleague, Seth Denson, and we talk about healthcare and news of the day.
Fantastic. I want to thank you so much, Andrew Clark, GDP Advisors, healthcare and risk management expert. Thank you so much for being on the Bigger Picture. Friends and neighbors, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We're going to be back in just 2 minutes' time.